Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is episode 4 of our custom ice cream truck build. In the last episode, we finished up our body swap of the 58 Ford onto the 2009 Chevy chassis. We chopped 8 inches off this front end, giving it this cool shorty look. The next step is going to be disassembling everything that we just installed and getting it ready for paint. So let's get to it. Alright guys, before I can get going on the bodywork on this cab here, I do have some welding to do. There are some areas where I have finished seam welding it, but there are more areas that I have only done some little tack welds. So you see up in here, and then I've got this whole area to do. I still have to finish up my seat mounts. So the next step, remove these seats, finish up absolutely all the welding, and then I can get going on the bodywork. So my wife has wanted to learn how to weld for a little while now, so I decided the best spot to teach her would be where the 3x2 rectangular tubing meets the 5x2 rectangular tubing, because they are both 120 wall, and 120 wall steel is super easy to get a nice bead on. Now before I can sand these doors, I do need to make a small repair to the passenger side. If you remember, the bottom here was interfering with that fender. I bent it out to get it close, but it's still a little bit mangled up. Now luckily, the door is very flat right here, so I can simply flip this door over onto a nice hard surface, and then I can just hammer this flat. So if my background looks a little different, that is because I am now working in my poor man's custom paint booth. I will be doing a standalone episode showing how I designed and built this coming out in probably 2 weeks, but you'll get to see it in action for the rest of this episode. All right, we've got the cab all prepped for our first bit of paint. I will be applying an etching primer to anywhere that you see bare metal. Everything is wiped down, everything is taped up. We've got the fans all ready to go. So the next step is going to be mixing up that primer and getting this thing coated. Guys, I could not be happier with this paint booth. Way better than the inflatable booth that I had in Phoenix. It is bigger. It gets the fumes out 1,000 times better. I had both of these fans running when I was spraying. As soon as I stopped spraying, I turned off one of them. The other one was running for a little while just to get the fumes out of here. Once there was absolutely no smell, I turned them off because it is freezing cold outside, and I've got our radiant floor heating going to keep it warm in here. It is maintaining about 60 degrees, which is on the low side of what this paint can handle, but I just could not be happier overall. The next step is going to be putting a black coat on top of this etching primer. I'm going with Speedokote's Hot Rod Black. I've used it many times before. I absolutely love it. We'll get a nice coat underneath the inside of our fenders here. We'll paint the front of the frame. We'll paint the frame underneath here where you can see it because our body sits a little higher. We'll paint the frame back here because, again, the box sits on top, so from far away you will be able to see this frame, and I don't want anyone seeing any rust. I'll also make sure to coat a few areas inside here where there is a little bit of surface rust going on. That will help protect it in the future. This is going to be really our last test for our paint booth here because the fumes from all the way back here have got to get sucked out before they end up mingling around and getting stuck on our plastic, or God forbid they make it over the curtain and onto our stuff that we've got on the other side. That would be very, very bad. I don't think that's going to happen because these fans have been so far so good. But only one way to find out, and that's to get the black paint on it. All right, guys, the black paint came out fantastic. It is all dry right now. The next step is going to be taping off the back of the frame here. We'll also tape off our inner fenders and the engine bay, basically everything that is going to stay black. I will then wet sand the cab at 400 grit just to make sure it's smooth, clean up a little bit of the overspray from our etching primer and from the black paint. Once everything is nice and clean, I'll go over it with a tack cloth, and then I will shoot it with a coat of gray primer. I will not shoot the inside here because this is going to be bed lined, but I will shoot back here because I'm not sure how far up the bed line is going to go. All right, guys, it is day 2 of our paint job. I think the primer on the cab came out pretty good. Now, I've said it before, and I'll say it again, this is a commercial job and not a show truck. So we've got some tough decisions to make on how much farther we need to go in our prep work before we lay down the top coat. Let me show you what I mean. Now, some guys will like to get the body as close to perfect as possible during the prep work before they do the primer, so that all they have to do after primer, give it a nice little wet sand, and then shoot it with a top coat. I am not one of those guys. I will leave a few known problems before I do the primer and then address those after the primer, knowing full well that I will either need to spot primer something or shoot the entire thing again. Like this area right here where I had the fuel filler neck. There are a few pinholes right here that I knew were going to sneak through. Also, right here, I should have added just a little bit more body filler to hide this. Also, there is a huge issue with our dash repair. Remember, when I was doing this, I said the only people that are ever going to see it are the people who are driving this truck and you guys who are watching this video, but this is a little bit too nasty for me to leave. You see, we don't quite have a nice clean edge on this line, and then right here, this line goes up and then back down a little bit. I knew that that was some issues. I didn't have a problem leaving that because it is so much easier to see these problems when it is all coated in one color instead of having body filler and steel and a little bit of red and then a little bit of the white primer all kind of mixed together, tricking your eyeballs. So what I've decided is I will spend one full day on this cab, improving it as much as possible, making sure that I have it re-primered this evening so that it can dry overnight, and then first thing in the morning I will wet sand it and then shoot it with the top coat. Only spending one day on it will improve it quite a bit, but it will also keep me from going overboard. Now you guys probably won't notice much difference from where it looks right now on camera, but those of you in the greater Chicagoland area who actually get to buy ice cream from this will be able to get up nice and close and see that it is not a total hack job like most of these commercial projects are. So let's get to it. All right, guys, it is the next morning, and I gotta say, I am so happy that I spent that extra time cleaning everything up. I could not be happier with how this dash turned out. It is going to look so clean that when people see it, they're going to see the gauges and they're going to think, wow, that's crazy that the gauge housing for the 58 was the same size as these new ones. Nobody's going to even know I spent all that time chopping it up to pieces. Here is where the fuel filler hose used to be. It is just totally clean. The next step is going to be wet sanding everything down with 400 grit to get it ready for the top coat. All right, guys, we are finally ready to put the top coat on this beautiful cab. The process is going to be 2 steps. We will paint the interior completely and then the exterior. So after I paint around the door, around the windshield, the dash, and then this door, I will then wait for the paint to dry, tape everything up, and then paint the exterior. And what that will do is prevent any overspray from sneaking its way in and contaminating the interior. So let's get that paint mixed. The color we are going with is bright pink. It is very bubblegum 1950s Americana reminiscent. I'm going with a Sherwin-Williams Genesis single stage paint. It is their premium series. It should be a fantastic paint. Let's get this in the paint gun. Alright guys, it is the next morning, all of the paint is dry. Overall, the cab looks fantastic. Now, to those people who only watch my time-lapse at the end of this build, they're just going to see me prep, paint, and everything will look perfect. But I did have one pretty big issue while I was painting this that I would like to show those of you who actually watch the individual episodes. So let's take a look. Now, when I started painting this cab, I realized there are two sections that nobody was ever going to see. The first is the roof, and the second is this back section here because it sits so close to that box. So the plan was to start painting on the roof so that I would have a little bit of extra time to make sure that the gun was all dialed in, and then finish on this back section here in case I started running low on material. Everything was going fine until I got to about right here. As I was spraying, I started running low on material, so I ended up deciding to do a slightly thinner coat across this entire section. That was my first mistake. I didn't even have enough to do this back corner, so I did have to go mix some, and then after I mixed it, I should have sprayed this whole area to finish up the first coat, but all I did was spray that little section down there. When it came time for the second coat, I mixed 20% more material so that hopefully I wouldn't have this problem. I was spraying everything and it went fantastic until, again, I got back to this section and I started to run low. So again, I made the same mistake. I was spraying a thin coat over. I was able to coat everything and I had a little bit extra left. So then I went back over it and then back over it. Unfortunately, it was basically thin layer on top of thin layer on top of thin layer instead of a nice thick coat. So I didn't really give a chance for it to all blend together. So I ended up with pretty bad orange peel down here. I've got a little light so that I can show you. So this is, of course, where the old fuel filler neck was. I think that repair came out fantastic. And you can see from the reflection of the light, we've got very minimal texture. Now, if you compare that to this back section here, you can really see it with this fluorescent light here. As I go across and you look at the reflection, it is just orange peel city. Not the end of the world, especially because nobody will ever see that, but I want to show it to you guys since you actually watch my individual episodes. Really the most important part of this cab right here, which again came out overall pretty good. And then back here, this of course will be super noticeable because this is the side that everybody is looking at. And then again, with that light reflection, you can see orange peel city on the back here. It is absolutely not worth spending any more time on this back section because, like I said, nobody will ever see it. A lot of times, if you take your pickup truck in for a change of color paint job, they won't even remove the bed. They'll just spray right here like this, and then you pull the bed off later and you realize that this entire section is the factory color. So the next step is bed lining this interior. So all I have to do is tape everything up and then bed line it. All right, we've got our front windshield ready to go. I've got the rubber installed. I also have our rope in the little channel here that will make installation a breeze. I like to tape up the rope like this so that it doesn't flop around while I'm trying to install it. As far as the rear window goes, it looks a little bit different. I did install a automotive vinyl to it. The reason for that is because I have been down this road before on similar builds where the sun likes to reflect off of the box and into the back window and right onto the back of my neck, which drives me nuts. So I will install these with the help of my lovely wife. The back window is going to be installed with her holding it in from the inside, and then I will pull on that rope on the outside to let it fit right into that little groove here. And then the front is installed the opposite way. She will be on the front here, pushing the windshield against the cab, and I will be on the inside, pulling that rope out. Alright guys, we are fast forwarding a little bit because I've spent the last couple of hours getting our gauges all set up along with the steering wheel and all of the electronics. The next step would normally be doing the headliner, but I have a roll-on insulator that I would like to put up there first, and I'm still waiting on that in the mail. So I'm going to go ahead and install the driver's side seat so that we can at least drive this truck around in the meantime. Alright, so the first round of primer is complete. Everything is looking fantastic. I really could top coat this right now and this thing would end up being a 10-footer, which would be just fine for a commercial job, but just a little bit more work on all of these parts will go a long way, turn the 10-footer into a 2-footer. So I went ahead and marked out in blue everywhere there is a imperfection that I need to address. So I'm going to start by wet sanding everything, get it all nice and smooth. I'll then go over any of these imperfections with some nice finishing putty. We will then resand those back down, and I'll shoot everything with a second coat of primer. Once that second coat of primer is on, we'll give it one last wet sand back down to 400 grit, and then we're ready for our top coat. Alright guys, so I make a terrible mistake here. I ended up switching paint guns halfway through this project, and it was because the paint booth was working so well that I could actually get away with a better gun than the 3M Accuspray that I was using. Unfortunately, I set up the gun incorrectly and I had way too much pressure going to it, so you see I have an unholy amount of overspray. It didn't really affect the paint job, but it did give me a pink paint suit, and now I have a pink floor. You see how we're at 15 ounces? Mm-hmm. Okay, so we want to go from 15 ounces up to 20. So as soon as we pour this in here, we're on a countdown, and no matter what, it's going to start to harden. So we're going to have to paint immediately.
But we don't have our stuff on.
That's okay, we'll put that on. And 20. All right, stir it very gently. Like this, all the way around, big circles. There we go, just like that. So I got some help from my little man on this hood here. This is the first time he has used a paint gun. He was very excited. He loves painting. I was able off camera to get this gun dialed in. I did a few little test samples to try and dial back on my overspray, and you can see there's just a ton less. So the rest of the project went pretty smooth sailing. All right, the truck looks fantastic. The next step would normally be to put on the front grille and install the headlights. However, those are not painted. I do plan on painting this grille a silver metallic along with our front turn signals, as well as our front bumper, which does not exist. So let's whip one up. For the front bumper, I'll be using this 3-inch round tubing with some end caps. I've got the first one cut to length. I'll cut another one the same, and then that way we can have 2 tubes running across the front to give it kind of a cool custom look. So I decided to use square tubing to connect the round tubes together because it allows me to use my knockout punch to nibble away a little crescent shape so that it fits nice and flush without having to use a hole saw or a grinder. I'll put a link to this knockout punch in the description. Well, the painting came out mostly good. No issues on the front or rear bumper. I did have one issue on our front grille here. Let me get a little light on so you guys can see. This side came out fantastic. This side, not so much. Got a pretty bad drip right there. Because this is a single stage metallic paint, I'm unable to sand that out and then buff it. I do have to recoat this. So I will sand through those little drips, get a quick recoat on the front, and we will be good to go. All right, so the truck is basically done. I'm still waiting on some weather stripping for both of the windows, and then I've got to finish painting our front emblem, but this is basically how it is going to look. I think it came out pretty freaking sweet. The next step is going to be building the box for the back, but for that, you'll have to wait for the next episode.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye-bye.